Here we are with our next interview. We're at the Pasadena Book Fair here in 2014, February, sponsored by the Southern California chapter of ABAA. And we're interviewing Chet Ross of Chet Ross Books. And Chet, give us a little bit about your background, family, schools, where you grew up, etc. A little biopic.
Well, my mother, I can start with her. That's where I started. She was the daughter of Italian immigrants that came over on the boat. She was the 21st of 22 children, no twins, same mother. I'm very lucky. 22 Roman Catholics.
Obviously.
You know, like rabbits. I'm very lucky to be sitting here at the table with you as a result of that and other things too. Hardworking people before the days of welfare, so they were resourceful, inventive, hardworking people. My father was a Missouri farm boy from Scott City, Missouri. He ended up being a career military officer, fought in 3 wars.
Wow.
A very hardworking man, simple man, neither of them with high educations. I did not grow up in a household with any books, any artwork. Almost none of my background as a child gives rise to what I am today and what I've done in my life. I was a military child. They call them brats.
Yep.
Child. It was a great upbringing, despite what anybody says. It taught me how to meet people fairly quickly, to form bonds, to assess personalities, and to form lasting relationships. Something I carry over to this day, and I did through my previous occupation before getting into book selling.
What was your previous occupation?
Well, I was a professional designer, applied designer, and a professor. I had my own design practice. I managed my company. I had a corporation. I had a 6,500 square foot shop where we built really fine furniture, museum quality types of things, commissions for corporations and individuals. And I taught applied design. I was the head of 2 design departments, one in fine arts and one in applied arts, architecture. So I've taught everything from interior architecture, furniture design and construction, architecture, industrial design. I'm a designer. I like to create meaningful form. I always have, and I probably always will, although I don't do it for a living anymore. It's a very high stress occupation.
Oh, really?
Very rewarding. Well, you're always meeting other people's expectations. Expectations for time, quality, ergonomics, budget, function, and then almost every time, of course, these forms that you're creating have to be executed by other people. So you're managing other craftsmen, workmen, and that's not always easy to do. Then you have amazing timelines and codes and legalities you're dealing with.
Wow, yeah.
And so there's a lot of stress involved in it. The payoff is the end product. And then you go on to the next one.
Yeah.
And it's just a high stress occupation. One reason why I got into the rare book business was I consider it to be not only a wonderful occupation and something I've always aspired to, but it's a low stress occupation for me. I think it's really fun. Of course, everything I've ever done, I think it's fun, or I wouldn't be doing it. That's kind of my nature. But I really enjoy this area. But anyway, as I grew up, I lived around the world, because my father was stationed in different places. And of course, back in those days, if we went to Japan, we didn't fly, we sailed across the ocean. And so I sailed both oceans as a young person, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
And big ships, not sailboats, but
Right.
cruise ships, passenger ships. I did my academic work at the University of Oklahoma in Norman, did my bachelor's work there, got my bachelor's in applied design. Served in the military for 2 years, was an infantry platoon leader in Vietnam. Once again, lucky to be here, to have gotten through that experience. It taught me a tremendous amount of self-confidence, is what that experience taught me, and respect for human life. I also got out, used the GI Bill to get on-the-job training, went back and got a master's degree in modern art history and design theory. And from that, I went on and applied for a teaching position at Drake University and started my academic career. And I always practiced design while I taught, and I love to teach. It's kind of an interesting thing because at some point in my life, I guess it was back in the mid-'80s, my mother had realized that I was the person in the family, I have 2 brothers and a sister, who had an affinity for older things. I collected and I cared for things. So she sent me the family archives. So I have all the albums and all that stuff, so I care for those. But in that were all my report cards from school. She saved them from the 1st grade to the 12th grade. And so being an analytically minded person like I am, I looked through them and I realized that my lowest grades throughout all my academic career were in history, in reading. I was always in remedial reading, and in speech. I stuttered really bad. I had a very tough upbringing on some levels. Yeah. And until I was a junior in college, I could not have told you my name. I didn't know how to say that particular sound, Chet. It was tough for me.
Really?
And I went to a speech therapist, and so, she was able to get me through it in a very interesting way, which is another story in itself. My point there is that it's interesting to me as I reflect back, because I have seemed to have made my greatest achievements in life in the areas that I was the weakest at when I was a child. I have a master's in history. I made my living as an artist, had very poor grades in art, and as a designer. And now I'm a rare book dealer, and I read all the time. And it's almost like, is this the last mountain I have to climb? I don't know. Yeah. And I don't know if I was brought up with people who have the inability of recognizing my true strengths, or if I have an ability to overcompensate for my deficiencies once I recognize them. I don't know that. I do know that I'm a self-taught type of person. In my 31 years of teaching at universities, I probably have taught 30 courses from freshman through master's level, and I think only one of those classes I ever had a class in that I study. I learn the information. I think that one of the best ways to learn something is to teach it. If you have the ability to convey information, which I seem to be able to do. It's kind of odd. It's like when I get in front of a group of people, I go into this mode. I don't know how to describe it, but I just go into a different zone, and I'm able to just fluidly convey this information and talk for my classes were 3 hours long, most of them, when you teach in architecture. Yeah. They're always studio classes or long lectures. And so anyway, and then in, let's see, in around the year 2000, I started collecting. I read my first book in my area. I'm a specialist book dealer. I specialize in exploration of the polar regions. It's my niche, you might call it. It's certainly my passion. Yeah. And I read my first book in it, and I didn't stop reading. I just started amassing all these books. And then I realized I had this collection. And I thought, God, this would be really interesting to work in this area. And so I started studying the history of being a book dealer, of book dealers. I studied the history of collecting and started to learn the language, which was one of the first steps. Yep. And I said, well, I think I could do this. So I made the transition gradually while I was teaching, and I started selling some on eBay, which back in those days was actually a pretty interesting venue.
Right.
I bought some wonderful material, and I met some very interesting people around the world. It was a very interesting, inexpensive way of tapping into a global demographic.
Absolutely.
And I formed some very interesting relationships back then. I also realized that if I was going to succeed in this, I not only had to learn something about it, learn the language, learn my subject matter, I also had to develop relationships. And one of the advantages I have is, we all come from different backgrounds. My background is applied design. There are probably not many booksellers out there from applied design backgrounds, but there's a tremendous amount of carryover from that discipline to being a rare book dealer. Mm-hmm. One of several, is I deal with my clients when I'm a bookseller. I don't deal them as customers. Customers in a grocery store buying produce. A client is somebody who I develop a relationship with, and I try to sell to them and engage them, and I try to bring them back to me. And so I think that that's very important to do, especially in this day and age.
Absolutely.
Where I know in the few years I've been involved in the rare book business, it's changed quite a bit. I started full-time in 2005, so not that long ago.
Right.
And so that's one of my precepts, you might say, is you must form lasting relationships If you have 10 good customers that you're interacting with on a fairly continual basis, they can keep you flowing.
Absolutely.
Especially in hard times.
As long as you get the material.
If you have the material, and that's getting tougher, of course, because collections are being downsized. People are being more resourceful, whether it be the economy or the basic resourceful nature based in the whole culture right now that we're adapting. It seems to be collectors are downsizing some, and dealers aren't buying as much for stock as they used to be.
Yeah, that's true.
And I was fortunate that I made the decision to be a specialist dealer, I believe. And I think I had to simply because I was starting late in the game.
Yeah.
And I'm a solo operation, and I have all these systems that I have put together to help me do what I do, but I know my limitations for organization. And there's I'm a firm believer that your ability to succeed is directly proportionate to your capacity for organization. And so I figured, well, if you're going to do it, you need to focus, just like you were if you were writing a PhD or a master's. And so I focused into one area, and I don't know if that's going to carry me through or not. I may have to eventually expand, but it's what I got started with, and it served me well. I have a good reputation, I have wonderful material, I interact with great clients and wonderful dealers. So I think I just answered your first question.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Next question would be, what's your internet presence?
My internet presence is interesting. I have a website that I spent a lot of time on putting together, and I did it like I would any design. I looked through about 15 different booksellers that I regarded as pretty sharp people, their websites, and analyzed those, not so much to study as a precedence, but more the principle behind what they were doing. And I looked at what I thought was strong and what was weak, and I tried to put one together that was uniquely me, capturing some of the strengths and eliminating the weaknesses. And so I've tried to put together a website that engages someone when they get into it. It provides them with visuals, which I think are critical, as
Absolutely.
well as
I agree.
the text. I monitor the traffic on my website, and so I know where the person's from, who's looked at it, when they've looked at it, what city they live. I don't know who they are. I know what books they've looked at. I know how much time they're spending at that particular site, what that particular page. And so I'm able to see, was my strategy effective? And when you have somebody go to a website and they spend 8 minutes, you know you're engaging them.
Right.
You know, they're not spending 8 seconds. They're not shuffling through. Now you have some, but that's a strategy of mine that is very important. So that's my primary internet presence. I'm not big on the online book selling through some of the major venues. I'm offended by the fees, excuse me.
Well,
it jacks the price up a lot, and there is one that I interact with, and I have some books on, but I don't have many. I do very well through my website. That's my internet presence. I also have a small store on eBay. I don't deal with them much anymore. The material's changed a lot. The clientele's changed a lot.
Absolutely.
But I have some items that are multiple copies, so I have a little store and I have them on there and they sell every now and then. Half the things I tend to buy there anymore, I tend to return. That's unusual.
It's because of the level of intelligence of those people who are listing books who shouldn't even be listing books.
That's true, except they have no criteria for what's good or what's bad with the person listing, so anybody can.
Yeah.
But there was a day when there was good material coming out there. I mean, really good. But not so much anymore, once in a blue moon.
When the internet first burst upon the scene, we were selling an average of 3 or 4 books a day.
Yeah.
Now we're selling maybe 3 or 4 books a month.
Yeah.
Because of the number of people who have gotten there. It used to be there were like 1,000 dealers. Now there might be 10,000 dealers for all I know. Do you operate an open shop, or are you just strictly a mail order book sale guy?
Well, I have a 1,600 square foot library in my home that I did. When I bought this place in Southworth, Washington, a very small community, I completely renovated it and gave myself that big space where I do my packaging and my photography. A little bit of restoration, but that goes to the pros, the good stuff, the important things. And my office is down there in my library. And I have clients that come there on appointment, and some just drop in on me. But it's not an open shop per se.
And
It's pretty much by appointment. So.
Who were some of the booksellers who had an influence on you, or who may have been a mentor to you when you were thinking about being a bookseller?
It's a good question. I didn't know any booksellers. I knew a gentleman in Tucson named Mike Green, a very good friend of mine, who was dealing with books relative to law, books of law. And I used to go to his place and hang out a lot and see some of the wonderful pieces he had. He was also into woodcut books, books with woodcuts, Lynn Ward type thing,
Yeah.
Vassos. And I was listening to his passion and watch him and go through his books. I just loved them. And then when I met Dick Weatherford through the eBay, oddly enough. He was
Really?
selling books for a Libris. He would they would buy collections and they would give him their Antiquarian books and he would sell them on eBay. And that's how I met him. And I started correspondence. We engaged. He invited me up to Seattle area. He lived in Southworth where I live now. And so I took him up on it. He put me up. I went to the book fair. I was hooked. I went back. I told my wife, I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to give him a year's notice at the university. I'm going to help him find my replacement. Not an easy task, because I was a utility guy. I could do a lot of things in this department. And I said, I think we're going to move to the Northwest. I've never been there before other than this one visit, but I think you're going to like it. And she didn't like Tucson, because it's so darn hot. And she loves the garden. Yeah. She's a master tailor, and so, you know, she had a good business, but I said, nah. And she was all excited. So we did. We just moved up there, and, you know, that's it. I've been going ever since.
When did you move to Southworth?
2005.
And
2005.
And so you don't, do you exhibit at the Seattle Fair?
Every year.
Every year.
Yeah, it's a wonderful little fair.
It's
not really little. It's a good size fair.
It's a good size fair.
Yeah.
Did you know the Palmers?
No, I bought from the Palmers, but I never knew the Palmers. By the way, two individuals who also affected me a lot, and one of them currently is Ed Smith.
Oh,
who lives on Bainbridge Island. Wonderful man. Wonderful man.
Yeah.
And another is a Canadian dealer named Bernie Lauser, who's been very helpful to me since the very beginning. Just a wonderful, honest human being, very knowledgeable, who has moved out of the rare book business and into the rare manuscript business, which is the trend right now.
Yeah.
That and photographic material.
Visual stuff.
And he tends to move into those kind of directions. It's easier to go to a fair. You got one suitcase, you walk in the door, you set your whole booth up. Me, I'm shipping to Caladex and all these cases.
Yeah, I used to watch Ken Rendell come to the Boston Book Fair with a sort of like a metal suitcase with $2 million worth of manuscripts in it, and I said, "Wow, that's the way to do a book fair."
Well, it's not an area that I can move. You know, it's a totally new area for me. I don't think I could move into it, so I'm okay with books. I have to expand a little bit outside of my area, I think, maybe Pacific Voyages or Northwest Coast, which is fine.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? They're lovely books,
yeah.
You know.
Why not? What do you think of some of the challenges that we face as booksellers going into the future?
Well, the challenges I think, are the same with any occupation, especially those who are self-employed. You have to be adaptable. I used to tell my students this for 20 years. If you can't retool every 5 years within your area or be able to make a transition to another one, you're going to be toast.
Yeah.
Because things are changing so fast. You can't tell me what's going to be happening right now in 5 more years. No. Not like we could in the 50s where things kind of moved along at a pace, or even the 60s where they really started to shift. But you really have to be able to adapt and adjust to changing trends and especially changing technology.
Oh yeah.
And you got to know what to accept and what not to. Like, I'm not a social media kind of guy at all. It's not my background. I don't want it. I think it's distractive. I don't see it as an asset. I see it as a deficit to society. But as far as the internet and computers, hey, they're amazing what they can do to help you organize, to help you research, to help you put a business together, to help you reach a global market. You need to tap into that and become well-versed in that area. And if you can't, you need to surround yourself with people who can supplement you. And that's what I do. I'm a firm believer in surrounding yourself with people who know more than you do.
If it's
That's
possible.
The best. Well, look at this. I was walking around this morning thinking, we have 200 booths. Conservatively speaking, we have 20 years average experience out here of each of these individuals. You're talking 4,000 years of experience out in that room. In my area that I want to know about, what more could you do but to be involved with those people?
Absolutely.
And so one of my goals, by the way, from early on, was to be a member of ABAA. That to me was a necessity if I was going to survive, and if I was going to exceed or excel in my business as much as possible. Because of the level of people, because of your code of ethics, that to me is critical. And I was so happy when I was asked to be a member, because that's so important to be involved with this level.
Who was your sponsor?
My sponsor was, who the heck was, well,
Tough questions, huh?
well, it's not a tough question. It's one of those things that's right there that won't come until I stop thinking about it.
Yeah, and when 2 minutes after you leave here, you'll say, damn, I could. So
Ask me another question, it's going to come to me.
Okay, when did you join the ABAA as a full member?
Well, I had to be working full-time for 4 years, and I started full-time in 2005, so I was asked in 2009.
And you joined?
And I joined.
And never looked back?
I never looked back. I was interviewed by Taylor Bowie, by the way. He came by.
Taylor came over?
Taylor was the guy that came by and sized me up.
Oh, he sized you up.
Well, he looked at my bibliographies,
Yeah.
and, my section on that, and so it was pretty extensive, and I was legitimate, and had this wonderful library, and he says, oh, God, it's much bigger than your pictures. I said, well, you got to be a little understated. You want to always exceed people's expectations. That's very critical in design and as a bookseller.
Do you issue catalogs?
I only issue a digital catalog, although I'm getting ready to do beyond that, because I realize it's a pretty important piece of work to do. And I'm set up for it. I can produce one in a very little amount of time if I want to, because of the type of database I've designed. And I'll give you one example of a digital one. I had a client contact me one time from Rhode Island. He said, Chet, he says, I'm trying to gather information on Eskimo. What do you have on Eskimo? So I just went to my database and I typed in keyword Eskimo, and it produced 28 publications I had with color photographs, full descriptions, and prices. I could hit another button, it produced a PDF with half-page descriptions and photographs, and I could, within an hour's time, I sent him a customized catalog of 28 pieces, full descriptions and everything, and of course he bought 5 items. And so I can produce it digitally very quickly in high resolution. I have a wonderful mailing list I've compiled over the last 12 years, but I've never really sent one out. I'm sure I could sell a lot more books if I did. But I actually have to be careful, because inventory is hard to get, and I actually slow down sometimes.
Really?
Because I have an easy time selling very good material.
Well, yeah, good material
we
sells.
all do.
Yeah.
But good material is harder to get. It's very expensive. And anymore, you got to have the best quality. You better have not so much the price, it's the quality, the uniqueness of the item is what you got to really have right now. The middle of the road stuff and stuff that used to sell, middle and now, it's just, I donate it.
Yeah.
I donate it to the Coast Guard, to their library, to polar ships, is what I do with a lot of my stuff now.
That's a good idea.
Well, yeah, it's a wonderful thing. They don't have a budget. They need it. It educates them. I've been invited by the Coast Guard to go out on their ship. I went out in the Pacific with them. They had a cruise going to the Arctic, and I was their Arctic expert. It was wonderful. And I gave some lectures on expeditions, famous expeditions that went into the waters where they were going. It was really great, to all the crew and all the officers and staff. It was a wonderful experience. And so I donate to these people because they're great people. You know, they have no budget, they have no books in their library, ship library, and now they got all these polar books.
That's great.
Why not?
Last question.
Yeah.
If you were thinking in terms of becoming a bookseller today, would you or could you?
I would. Yeah, I would. I think it's. You have to be pretty smart at it. You have to be resourceful. You have to be knowledgeable. It's not a short trip. I mean, I'm an amateur expert. I believe.
Yeah.
Is where I am. I think you got to be in something 10 years full boat before you can start to be innovative at it.
I agree.
Really call yourself a professional at it. It takes time, and you got to be patient. You got to be willing to educate yourself and to work with people, to be flexible. I think there's a good future in rare books, believe it or not. Despite what everybody says about, oh, the digital this and I think they'll always be valuable as an artifact, as a vessel of significant information, as a tactile experience, as a sensory experience. I mean, I love nothing more than going down at nothing more. It's one of the things I love, to go down to my library at night when it's quiet and open up one of these books and just hear the paper.
Yeah.
And it's just, the sound is so wonderful. But also it can't be replaced by anything visual in front of you. I mean, even now, if I have a document, I got a proof, I print a copy off and I redline it, and I read it that way. I can't do it on the screen.
I have a lot of trouble too, but
I think I would. I love what I'm doing. The people are wonderful. The booksellers, the clients, I enjoy talking with them. The travel is nice. I see some of the most beautiful collections in the world. I get to appraise some of these things. I drink wine with some of these things. Well, I read so many of my books that I can sit down with someone who has a collection of polar books and I can talk about more than price and condition.
Right.
I can get into the expedition, I can talk about the players, I admire what they have, and we have a good time, and that's important.
Good times are important.
Yeah.
But we've come to the end of our session.
It's been fast.
Thanks very much, Chet.
Thank you. It's been a
Enjoyed the
pleasure
class.
talking with
Enjoyed
you.
it.